Hi everyone, welcome to this week's recap for Educational Leadership, Management and Program Assessment. This week our focus has been on strategic planning, which, as I'm sure a lot of you have noticed, specifically relates to step 2 of assignment 2, which is your team strategic plan. So I'm not going to go into every step here of the assignment, as we've covered this in detail in your collaborates, but it's really important to see the connections between what we've covered in week 9 and this particular step of assignment 2. Okay, so in the next slide, I'm going to take you through some of the broader concepts we covered in week 9 and how they relate specifically to some of the key areas you need to focus on for step 2. So according to your e-text, strategic planning is a process that builds on the evidence gathered through the evaluation process and ensures that plans for the future take account of both external influences and the internal capacities of the early childhood setting. So this week we covered quite a few points, and starting with strategic planning, some of you might have been involved in the strategic planning process before, perhaps not even just in early childhood settings. You might have been involved in another capacity. Sometimes in schools you can be involved in their strategic planning. And I guess in a nutshell, strategic planning is about knowing what it is that they're about and what they'd like to be achieving in the future, essentially. So one major part of that is about establishing a vision, and that is a key part of your team's strategic plan. Step 2, part of assignment 2, is articulating what your vision is, what your goal, what you're hoping to achieve. And so a shared vision, it includes all the voices of all stakeholders, and it can act as a motivator and helps to provide a sense of unity and community. And developing a vision that underpins your future plans of a setting, it's going to give these plans a purpose, okay? It's going to give them meaning. So it provides sort of a direction and a focus which informs how, why, and what sort of the plans are of the future, and also your daily work. So that was one of the key parts we learned this week. Another was about evaluation. So evaluation is a really important part of the planning process, and we know that evaluation has occurred in the context of assignment 2 because that's what has led us to this point that we're in developing the policy. Okay, so an evaluation was conducted and it was determined that there was a gap essentially in digital communication, and that's where it's led us to. Okay, so beyond that though, so an important part of evaluation, it's not just considering where are we now, but that really underpins where we're headed. Okay, so a big part of evaluation is being able to reflect. And in that is where your SWOT analysis comes in too. So it's about considering, what are perhaps our strengths, our weaknesses, and what are the opportunities. So looking to the future and what are the threats. So they're more future focused goals. We also have talked about and considered the collaborating with key stakeholders. So we know that this is really crucial, and we know that that's an essential part of the strategic planning process. And one major part that sometimes people can forget is that stakeholders aren't just your parents in your early childhood setting. So week 10 will go into further detail about the importance of relationship building and stakeholders. But your e-text this week actually touches on a really important consideration about including the voices of children. So that's something you might want to consider as well. And the next point was also about ethical decision making. So that's been a key focus of the unit in the central sort of responsibility of leadership and how this needs to be a part of your strategic planning. So this is something you need to think carefully about. How will you act ethically to include all your relevant stakeholders? How will you maintain transparency? How will you demonstrate inclusion. These are all ethical decision-making responsibilities. And what will inform your sense of ethical decision-making? What will inform ethical action plan steps, perhaps? Will you look to the code of ethics as an example? And lastly, we've also looked at communication and leadership. So far, we've learned about how important communication is for leaders. But in terms of the development of your policy and strategic plan, you need to be thinking about how will you bring people along for the journey. Think about the ways in which you're going to communicate to gather information, to gather data, and how will you communicate each task that comprises your action plan, or even just the action plan more broadly. How are you going to communicate that? Okay, so where to from here? After week 9, we head into week 10, and the focus of week 10 is on professional relationships. So our focus is on building relationships and forming collaborative partnerships. And we know through research that the benefits of this include improved communication and connections within the community, improved image within the community, and improved satisfaction with families and within the centre as well. And so why this is relevant is in particular for assignment 2. In step 2, you've got the section which is about identifying your stakeholders. And in this section, you need to state who the policy is going to involve and who it impacts. And like we've already discussed, it's really important to think beyond just the parents and the children in the setting. So think about who the policy will be impacting on. And in the case of digital professionalism, it's really about everyone who comes into the centre. Okay, so that's going to be our focus for week 10. All right, thanks for tuning in, everyone. I hope your assignments are going well, and we'll see you on the boards.